Chapter 4. Fight on the second day of school. Bethany woke up early just to make pancakes for Sebastian and the foxes. They slept on the living room's floor since there's no furniture yet. She slowly walked, avoiding hands and tails, and successfully entered the kitchen. She grabbed the ingredients from her other bag that packed with food and started mixing them in a big bowl. By the time she finishes cooking them, Sebastian and the foxes walked in, mumbling about food. "Good morning," she said, and gave them each a plate full of pancakes.
Ooh, pancakes!
Sebastian cheered and chucked down his pancakes. Bethany rolled her eyes and smiled.
What's wrong with you? It's not like the food will disappear.
Red said, looking weirdly at Sebastian.
If you haven't tasted Beth's food, don't judge.
Sebastian said, putting another pancake into his mouth. Red looked at Snow. She just shrugged, and they dig in too. Bethany and Sebastian were looking at the foxes expectantly. Then their eyes went wide and looked at Bethany. Sebastian was grinning like a madman. "Are you the angel of pancakes?" Snow asked, as she continued to munch on the pancakes, but Red was quiet. "What is it, Red? You don't like it?" Bethany asked. Red shook his head.
No, it's just I haven't eaten something this good for a long time,
he said as his eyes turned watery.
By the way, how did you learn to cook pancakes this good?
He asked, while munching his pancakes too, blinking away his tears. "Oh, well, I learned to cook when I was 11 because of two people," Bethany said, munching on her pancakes too.
Hey!
Sebastian argued. "Oh, hush. I learned to cook because of Sebastian and Harry, my uncle. And trust me, he's a terrible cook," Bethany said, remembering the first time that Harry tried to cook, he almost set the kitchen on fire. She chuckled and drank her cup of milk. After they finished their meals, Bethany and Sebastian went on to do their morning routine. They told the foxes about their mission last night, and they understood because they would do the same thing just to survive. They bid farewell to the foxes and went to school. Sebastian bid farewell to Bethany, and they went separate ways because he had math while she has art. And now he has a problem finding his math classroom. He sighed when he reached the lockers for the third time. He laid his head on a random locker which made a small bang. Then he felt someone tapped his shoulder. He turned around and saw Ramona. He doesn't know why, but he just can't take his eyes off of hers. "Excuse me, but that's my locker," she said, and pointed at the locker that behind Sebastian. He looked at it, then looked back at Ramona.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here,
he said. "So, what's the problem? You look stressed out," she said, while taking some books out and put into her bag.
I kind of don't know where the math classroom is located,
I said, while rubbing my neck. "Well, it's your lucky day. I have math class too. Let's go," she said, giving him a smile and walked away. He gave a little chuckle and followed her. When they walked in the class, everybody stopped doing what they were doing and looked at them. The girls were glaring at Ramona while the boys were glaring at him. He ignored them and took an empty seat. The whole day kinda passed with no one bothering him, which he loved very much. He decided to learn more about Ramona by spending our free period together. But then 3 jocks approached them.
Well, who do we have here? Miss Alpha and the fresh meat everybody was talking about.
The guy who Sebastian thinks is the leader said. "Go away, Jake," Ramona said. Sebastian gave her a look that said, "Let me handle this."
And who do we have here? Dumb?
He said and pointed at the first boy.
Dumber.
Then at the last one.
And dumbest.
Lastly, at the leader, Jake. He heard Ramona giggle. Jake's face turned bright red with anger.
Why, you...
he said and grabbed Sebastian's collar, but he just gave Jake an uninterested look and slipped his hands into my pocket. Ramona tapped his shoulder. Jake turned to look at her, and she slapped him.
Oh-ho!
Sebastian exclaimed excitedly.
You bitch!
Jake exclaimed in outrage. He let go of Sebastian and raised his hand, intended to slap back. He doesn't know why, but his body just moved by its own towards Ramona and grabbed Jake's wrist.
What kind of gentleman are you, slapping a girl?
Sebastian asked, raising a brow. He knew they were attracting a crowd, but he couldn't care less.
What? Fuck off!
Jake shouted, snatching his hand back.
You heard me. What kind of gentleman are you?
Sebastian repeated. Then he felt someone grabbed his hand. Stop, Sebastian. Let's just go instead of wasting our time on these idiots, Ramona said, and Sebastian nodded.
What did you just call me?
Jake shouted and tried to punch Ramona, but Sebastian was faster. He used his palm to stop the punch. He looked at that Jake's eyes, which expressed shock. Sebastian smirked.
You shouldn't have done that.
Then Jake's friends made a move trying to punch Sebastian. Foolish, foolish. Who do you think he is? He quickly pushed Jake and squat down, which made them punch each other. They stumbled back, holding their noses. Impressive, Ramona said. He gave her a cheeky grin. From the corner of his eyes, he saw the rest of Jake's crew member came, and he groaned. And here, he thought he could get comfortable with Ramona. He sighed. Well, he guesses he just has to stick to this then. How do you feel when someone informed you that your brother is in a fight with 10 perfectly built jocks? Well, it felt terrifying. It's not that Bethany thought that Sebastian will get beaten up, it just terrifies her that he will blow his cover. It all happened when Bethany was in class, copying all the notes that the teacher wrote on the board, when all of a sudden, a girl barged in the class. The teacher stops writing and looks at the girl with a brow raised. Is Bethany Lloyd in this class? The girl asked. Present, Bethany said, raising her hand. Your brother is in a fight with 10 jocks, and... Bethany cut her off and was in front of her immediately, grabbing her shoulder. Where? Bethany demanded to make the girl squeak. Where? She said, a little louder while shaking the girl's shoulders. In the fields, the girl said, and Bethany sprint off towards the field. If Bethany got her hands on him, oh, he's gonna get it. Real bad. When she reached the field, she saw him taking the last one down. But then she saw one more getting up, trying to strike Ramona, who was behind Sebastian. She quickly ran towards her. When he almost strikes her, Bethany grabbed his fist, crushing it hard. That guy looked at her like she had just grown another head. Bethany smirked. Striking from behind? Now, that's not polite, she said, then twisted his hand and kicked him in the gut, making him flew back. Once she made sure that he's out cold, she turned to face a now frightened Sebastian. Sebastian James Lloyd, what do you think you're doing? She shouted, catching even more attention. She ignored them in favor of walking closer to him and whispered into his ears. You know you almost blew your cover, she whispered and pulled back.
Yeah, sorry, not sorry. I was just teaching these kids how to behave like gentlemen,
he said with a smirk. She sighed and rolled her eyes. Typical. I'm sorry, he was just trying to protect me when one of them almost hit me, Ramona said, pointing at the jocks on the floor. Bethany's face softens and sighed. Come on, let's go before the teacher arrives, Bethany said, and was going to walk away when they heard a bitch shouted. What have you freaks done? They turned around and saw a blonde queen wannabe knelt next to who she thought was the leader of the jocks. They ignored her and kept walking. Didn't your parents teach you any manners? With that, they stopped.
What did you just say?
Sebastian turned around and asked, fist clenching. Bethany closes her eyes and clenched her hand into a ball, shaking. You heard me. I said, what have your parents been teaching you, huh? Do your parents go around and beat people up too? She said. Bethany turned and glared at her. She notices her face turned pale, but she covers it up quickly with a smirk. What? You gonna beat me up like your parents? She said, and with incredible speed, Bethany's hand was around her neck, choking her. What did you just say about my parents? Bethany asked darkly. The blonde girl kept on gasping for air and was scratching Bethany's arm, but that only made Bethany grab on harder.
Bethany?
Sebastian said cautiously, but she ignored him and kept on looking at the bitch whose face was turning purple. Why are you not talking anymore? Cat got your tongue? She asked darkly. Then she heard a voice that made her almost stop.
Bethany, put her down.
Don't tell me what to do, she said sternly, but her hand that was choking the bitch's neck loosened a bit. She turned her head a little and glared at Randolph.
Bethany, listen to me. If you don't let go of Levi now, she's gonna die,
he said, and Bethany sucked in a breath. Wouldn't that be wonderful? She thought and grabbed more tightly.
Eyes.
Bethany blinked, waking up from her dark thoughts, and gasped. She looked back at Levy, whose face was turning blue, and let go. Levy crumpled down like a puppet got cut off from its string. Levy coughed and sucked in air into her lungs greedily. Bethany looked down at her hands. Then she was sprinting, weaving through the crowd. Without hesitation, Randolph chased after her. She ran as fast as she could, away from the crowds, from those strangers. She ran inside the school, weaving through peoples as she goes. Then she saw an empty classroom. Without any second thoughts, she ran inside the classroom, closing the door behind her, and hid at a dark corner. Stupid. She was supposed to prevent Sebastian from making a scene, not adding another. She almost fucking blew her cover. What's gonna happen if she did? Not only they're gonna get killed, but so is Harry and him. Then the door burst open and came in Randolph. He did a quick scan of the room, then his eyes landed on her. He breathed out a relieved sigh and walked towards her, but as he came closer, Bethany didn't hear him as she was deep in her thoughts. His face softened and knelt in front of her. The next thing he did, shock broke her out of her thoughts as he hugged her, and she can't help but breathe in his scent. She heard him chuckle, and she blushed. Thanks, she said quietly.
For?
He asked. Just now and this, she said, and blushed even more. He pulled away from their hug and looked at her, but she was looking at her hands. He uses his fingers to lift her chin and tilting her head up to make her look at him.
You're welcome,
he said, and she turns away, blushing. What's wrong with me? I'm an assassin. This is her target, and you don't blush at your targets.
Come on,
he said, getting up.
Let's get back to your brother. I think he's worried sick by now,
he said, and reached out his hand for her to support when she was getting up. But when she touched his hand, a spark went through her hands. She quickly let go of his hands and looked at him, but his face wasn't surprised like hers. He was grinning? What was that, and why is he grinning like that? She thought, but what she didn't expect is someone replying. 'Cause you're his mate. Duh. That's what happens when two mates touch each other, a voice said in her head. Who's there? She asked, and looked around the empty classroom. The name's Charlotte, and I'm your wolf, Charlotte said. Oh, hey, wait, did you just say wolf? She asked her, and she could feel her nodding. How? I'm a human. How can I have a wolf if I'm a freaking human? Why am I still talking to you? She shouted. Ding, wrong answer. No, you're not a human. You're a werewolf. Like your mate, his sister, and... She trailed off. And? Bethany asked. And your brother, she finished.